Hello, good morning. Thanks for watching today. Despite a growing protest over the 6-week wait, the rollout of universal credit is going ahead. This programme has been told it could leave people near destitute, with food banks unable to cope with the rise in demand. Our reporter John Owen has been talking to people on the benefit. We brought you his full film earlier. Here's a short extract.
The government's flagship benefit reform, universal credit, has been under fire due to the length of time new claimants have been forced to wait for their first payment. Yesterday, the government suffered a symbolic defeat in Parliament as opposition MPs voted in favour of pausing the rollout of the new system.
In theory, claimants should expect to wait around 5 to 6 weeks for their first payment. That includes a 7-day period in which new claimants are usually not entitled to any money at all, plus a 1 calendar month assessment period. But in reality, many new claimants are being forced to wait much longer.
Anna was moved on to universal credit from other benefits a few weeks ago, and she says that for her, the impact was devastating.
I applied for it, then they said, okay, got all my evidence and everything, and they've turned around and said I have to wait between 6 weeks and 3 months before I get a payment.
And so, for the last 2.5 weeks, you haven't had any money in at all?
Nothing whatsoever.
And how have things been for you in that time? Very,
very difficult. Last weekend, we've had no food. My 5-year-old's last food was school dinners. On a Saturday, we were walking down the street and she was searching in bins for food because she was starving. She was like ripping McDonald's bags to see if there was any chips or anything on the floor. It was awful, broke my heart. Sunday there was no food, she was going to bed, her stomach was rumbling, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, and she had no food Saturday, Sunday.
Here in Ripon, West Yorkshire, Brendan was able to get an advance payment when he applied for universal credit in June, but it wasn't enough to cover his living expenses and care of his 7-year-old son Tobias, who lives with him 3 days a week.
It probably lasted me about 2 weeks, to be honest, and then, left with nothing. So then you're hoping that what you've got in is enough, which it wasn't. I've never been in this situation where I could lose my home, and it's quite, it's a big thing. I'll die on them streets. If I do get evicted, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know where to go for help. So I don't know, really. I didn't think that far ahead. It's all right.
To understand why the government's been quite so determined to press ahead with universal credit, we've come to the place where it was born, the Centre for Social Justice. It's a think tank that was responsible for the original design of the policy.
Let's be under no illusions. This new system, as it stands, is so much better than the old system. Let's not pretend people weren't falling into rent arrears under the old system or getting stuck out of work in welfare dependency under it. If you look at every study done by everyone from the IFS to the government, universal credit on the whole will lead to more people being in work, those people earning more money, and those people more likely to stay in work, because the way the system is designed is to support people in work, not just get them into work and leave them.
The government did make one concession yesterday by agreeing to make the helpline used by universal credit claimants free of charge. But despite rumours about a reduction in the waiting time for payments, the government say they have no broader plans to change course.
Well, let's speak now to some of the people at the sharp end, 2 people in a position and 2 people in a position to do something about it. Sarah Spoor is a full-time carer for her 2 grown-up disabled sons. In Liverpool, Tony Garvey, who was left without any income for 3 months because of an IT glitch. Also with us, Chris Green, Conservative MP and member of the Work and Pension Select Committee, which discussed universal credit yesterday. And Margaret Greenwood, who is Shadow Employment and Inequalities Minister for Labour. Thank you for talking to us. Tony, let me start with you. Until last Christmas you were in work. Tell us what happened when that job came to an end.
Hi Victoria, thanks for having me. I think what happened last year, I've been claiming universal credit since January 2016. I was able to get a part-time job just over Christmas, which I was delighted about. It was sorting post, it was only for the Christmas period, so it had an end date. So I worked my last shift on Christmas Eve. I was actually off the threshold to universal credit. I didn't need it for all that time, which is what I want, and I assume what the DWP want. But when I returned, I'd found my claim wasn't restarted instantly. Between Christmas Eve and March 24th, I received no money from the Universal Credit Scheme, I had to sell a car my mother left me to make ends meet. I moved in with my father again because I had no other options. I spoke to Citizens Advice. I spoke to my MP who agreed it was a traumatic time for me, and at that point I was very angry, as you can imagine, because I was getting no response. And having worked in IT for 11 years before becoming unemployed, I did find a bit of irony in being told I was suffering so much because of a system fault, a glitch that was never expanded on, even when my MP Justin Madders looked into it, which I found not good enough, to be very blunt.
Okay. Chris Green, could you go without any income for 3 months?
No, certainly couldn't. I think the principles behind universal credit are right, but the practice, the rollout, is in so many ways.
No consolation to Tony.
Absolutely. There are substantial problems with the current system. I think many people, the principles are right, but the actual rollout has been very slow because there are so many problems with the system. These problems should never have happened, and the Department of Work and Pensions have to sort out immediately.
Can you imagine no income, having to sell your car, having to move back in with your parents? I mean, just think about that for a moment. That's as a result of the system that your government designed.
Yeah, and this is why they've got to sort it out quickly. This is why David Gort, Secretary of State, has to look into all of these problems. All of these problems he's fully aware of. This is why.
What do you think of the system then?
Again, I can support the principles. I think many people support the principles, but the practice,
not the principle.
The practice, the rollout has been far too flawed. A huge amount of work needs to be done to rectify it so people aren't left high and dry with no money at all, no support. And the system was never intended to be like this. There are major glitches, and the Secretary of State needs to sort it out.
The system was designed in a particular way to be like it is. Why design a system that makes you wait for 6 weeks before you get your first payment?
Well, there are the options of advances, but
Sure. I'm asking you, why design a system that makes you wait 6 weeks before you get the first payment?
Well, I disagree with that. I think the principle behind it reflecting work, which is the intention, so it's more of a salary kind of monthly pay. So in that sense, 6 weeks is completely inconsistent with the idea behind universal credit.
Why design a system that means for every £1 you earn, your universal credit payment will reduce by 63 pence?
And that's substantially better than some people working over 16 hours who start losing about 95, 96 pence in the pound. So it's not perfect. It's a long way from being perfect.
One of your Conservative colleagues said yesterday the wait was causing, and I quote, families going into rent arrears, turning to food banks and spiralling further into debt. Is she wrong or is she right?
No, she's right.
Okay. How would you describe this system?
Yeah, it's deeply flawed. It's flawed in the design, but also in the implementation we're seeing huge problems. So the flaws in the design are so many. There's a built-in 6-week wait, which will drive a lot of people into problem debt, which we're seeing already. There's the fact that the housing element is paid directly to the claimant rather than to the landlord, which leaves vulnerable people exposed, and we're seeing increase in people in rent arrears. We're seeing a big increase in people going to food banks where the full service has been rolled out.
I mean, despite what you both say for Labour and you as a Conservative MP, the Department of Work and Pensions says it's working, because with universal credit, people are moving into work more quickly and they're staying in work longer than under the old system. You would want that, wouldn't you?
We certainly would want that. However, those figures that the Minister put forward to the House predate the cuts to work allowances in April 2016. So he's using old data to make the case for the new arrangements. Okay. So it isn't really a true picture.
Let me bring in Sarah Spall then. Sarah, you care for your two grown-up disabled sons. Tell us what that's like, first of all, and then how you have found it trying to get universal credit for your 20-year-old.
Well, I'm caring 168 hours a week, for which I get paid 37p an hour because I get carer's allowance, so I'm caring through the night.
That means you're, from what you said, you're awake most of the night?
Yes, I'm up and down testing blood sugars and sorting problems out. If I don't, there's potential they die, so it's not an option for not doing it.
Okay.
Then I'm caring obviously for them through the day if they're with me. If they're at college, then I'm liaising with the support workers. They have to have one-to-one support workers, and then most of my life is spent filling in these kind of forms. This is actually a PIP, and I have to do this regularly, and then you have to do DLA forms. I've got one child transferring over.
But exactly, the 20-year-old is transferring to universal credit. What has that been like for you? Because you have to do it on his behalf.
Yes. So last October he turned 20. So I had, and up to that point we had tax credits and disabled tax credits and child benefit. That just vanished overnight. So I lost over £8,000. I then had to try and claim that back by applying for universal credit. So
You didn't lose £8,000, it was replaced by universal credit?
no, I'm down £2,500 a year. So for this year and next year, it'll be £1,500 recurring.
Because the DWP say as long as your circumstances haven't changed, which they haven't,
No.
then you should get the same on universal credit or potentially more.
Yeah, well, it hasn't worked out that way.
Have you contacted them?
Not to sort out this, because I've been spending all my time writing to them, asking them to hurry up with the payment.
Okay. I mean, do you think David Gauke, the relevant Minister, the Work and Pension Secretary, is going to listen to people like yourself in his own sort of team?
I think the Department of Work and Pension Select Committee has done a huge amount of good work in pressurising the government.
Yeah, the only thing
David
you've
Gauke,
changed though is the phone line is becoming free from November. That's the only thing. That was you know, in the scheme of things, that's on a spectrum. It's not the most important thing, according to people like Sarah and Tony.
And that should have been right from the beginning, because you look at the principles behind it, that should never have happened. So what they need to do is actually look more closely. So 6 weeks is far too long, and the advance payments need to be far more clear, far more
any
open.
sign that they're going to look at that again? I didn't get that from the Secretary of State yesterday.
That's why we, I think, together and hearing the reality of the work and pensions, what they're doing, the universal credit and the rollout, they need to be listening to the evidence and change it, radically change it, because that implementation has to work right from the off for everyone on it.
It seems to me that when they hear the evidence, they say, well, just get an advance payment then. But as you've seen from our film, that also leads some people into debt because they have to pay it back.
Yeah, there are problems with the advance payment system, people having access to it, and whether it's 6 months or 9 months to pay it back. That does lead to problems. And there is so much, I think, actually there's a huge amount of cross-party support for reforming the system. Because in the debate yesterday, there was a huge amount about how Labour agreed with the principal's direction, and actually Labour initially wanted the debate to be on pausing and fixing, and then changed it halfway through the debate.
No, that's absolutely not the case. What happened yesterday was
do you know what? We're not going to go over yesterday. What does Labour want?
We want.
If you won an election, would you scrap universal credit?
What we've asked the government to do is to pause so that we can look at all of these problems, which are really serious, affecting thousands of people up and down the country, and to fix the problems.
Okay.
And
if you win the next general election as Labour, would you scrap universal credit?
What we're saying is we've got a Social Security Commission that is looking into all of these things, and we're looking at the huge array of problems. Well, we're working on it at the moment, but obviously we want a general election as soon as possible.
So despite...
So you deliver as soon as possible then?
Well, you're in government, but the problem is, yesterday David Gauke was boasting that 80% of people get their payment on time, which means that 20% don't. So over the next 6 months, 80,000 people are likely not to get paid within 6 weeks.
But despite all the complaints you have, you can't tell us today whether a Labour government would scrap universal credit.
What we agree of the principle of making work pay, but with the changes that have come in under the government in the last 2 years, that isn't the case. So we agree with that. We want to make universal credit work, and we have offered to work with the government to work on the issues that are problematic. But we're very clear there needs to be a pause so that no more people are made to suffer in the way that we've heard today.
Tony, if there's any committees, I'd like to sit on them.
Right.
Okay. Tony, final word from you. How are you now?
Still coping. I mean, I chalk that up to myself, that the DWP motto of helping people back into work. I think after suffering on my own for 3 months, I'll take the credit, thank you very much. Okay. I don't think it's fit for purpose as it stands, and they should rethink the implementation, because either the design or implementation is either, at this point, I think, malicious or simply incompetent. Yeah.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. We appreciate it. Tony Garvey in Liverpool, Sarah Spohr in the studio, Chris Green, Conservative MP, and Margaret Greenwood, Shadow Employment and Inequalities Minister. Thank you.